and welcome to Breaking Down Better Call Saul. This is kind of a throwback to a series I did many years ago, or half a series, or a 20th of a series that I did many years ago called Breaking Down Breaking Bad, where I would kind of go through every episode of Breaking Bad. I think I got like a few episodes into the first season, and I also did a few reviews of the very dramatic and impactful final 8 episodes of Breaking Bad. And I've been keeping up with Better Call Saul, throughout the whole entirety of its run, but the issue for me, I guess, was just time, and I never got. I think I did one video on season 2, and I was talking about how I didn't hate Chuck, because everyone hated Chuck, and I was like, I kind of understand Chuck. I see where he's coming from, and so that was something where I had to make a video about it, I guess. But I've never done like my thoughts on the whole show, and it is currently June of 2022. The first 7 episodes of the 6th and final season have come out, and they were incredible, like unbelievable. And so I kind of felt like I needed to talk about Better Call Saul, but I thought, why not go back to the beginning? So the 7th episode came out maybe 2-3 weeks ago, and there's a big break until the final episodes come out in July 17th, I believe. And I thought, I can't let my prevailing image of the show be what happened at the end of that 7th episode of season 6. So I went back, and at first I thought maybe I'll just like watch a couple of episodes of the first season, and kind of just get a feel for the beginnings of the show, and go back to 2015 and how would it feel going back to the beginning after so long. But I just got wrapped into it. I got really drawn into Jimmy's story, and I've burned through the first 4 seasons. Like, I'm now at the end of season 4, and I thought, why don't I make a mini series, not going through every single thing, not going through every single episode, every single twist and turn, but just giving you my brief thoughts on each season. So this will be my thoughts on season 1, and we'll get into what I think about various elements of the show and the characters and things like that. But first of all, I just wanted to talk about like my memory of the show to begin with, when it first started, and when the word was coming out that they were going to do a show called Better Call Saul. I was like, wow, they're actually gonna do this. They're gonna do a sequel/prequel series to Breaking Bad. Now, my history of Breaking Bad, I came to it rather late in the game. It was, I think, February of 2013 jumps out to me for some reason, but it was early 2013. And it was been hyped up to me for years, and I heard Robbie Webster, one of my favorite YouTubers at the time, talking about it and just breaking down the concept, and me going, that sounds kind of fun and interesting. And it was kind of fun, it was kind of interesting, but it was mainly holy shit, like dramatic, explosive, like incredible storytelling. And I melted through the first 5 seasons, like seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, and the first half of season 5 in like, I think it was 13 days. I noted it down, and I was like, wow, that just broke my life. And I was like getting no sleep. I was going into work on like 2 hours sleep because I just could not stop watching Breaking Bad. 19th of January 2013, finished season 4 of Breaking Bad. Fucking hell. Jesus. Loved it. Had about 6 months to wait until the final 8 episodes were coming out, and I watched those 8 episodes like every night live. I got like a live stream to America. I was living in Norway at the time, so I got a live stream at like 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm watching every episode, with the exception of Ozymandias. I had to wait until the morning afterwards because I was actually studying at the time at the local university with basic Norwegian. Anyway, cut a long story short. For me, Breaking Bad was the best show I'd ever seen. I loved every single thing about it. I watched it again with Connie, and she was a bit reticent to get into it, but she really loved it once she got into it. And so it's just like, that's the pinnacle, Breaking Bad. And then a year later, I think it was, they announced we're doing a prequel show called Better Call Saul, featuring the lawyer, Saul Goodman. The shady, nefarious lawyer, Saul Goodman. And I was like, okay, I like Saul. I don't love him. He's not my favorite character of the show or anything. I like Bob Odenkirk. So okay, we'll see what it is. And I figured it was going to be like a comedy, like Case of the Week. How can Saul Goodman, get his get his client out of this one? And then 2015 rolls around, and here it comes. And okay, it's looking interesting. I wasn't too hyped up or anything, but let's give this thing a shot. Well, from the beginning, it's like, oh, this is just like Breaking Bad. Like, there's serious elements, there's comedic elements. Obviously, with Saul and with Bob Odenkirk's comedic timing, there's a fair bit more comedy in this one. But it's kind of a masterstroke in that in this first season, we're introduced to Chuck, who is Saul Goodman slash Jimmy McGill, as we'll know him in Better Call Saul. His brother, his older brother Chuck, played by Michael McKean. And you have these two guys who are like mostly known for comedic roles. Michael McKean, Spinal Tap, among many other things. And then Bob Odenkirk cut his teeth as a comedic performer and actor. So you have them kind of playing against type a little bit. But it's kind of the road and the route that many comedic actors do take, and they slip into those dramatic roles quite easily. But, with Bob Odenkirk, there's a lot of humor in this role as well. But we're seeing Jimmy McGill, not Saul Goodman. So I had no idea what the plan was, how far they were going to go along with this, if we're going to see Saul Goodman at the end of this first season, and then season 2, it's Breaking Bad timeline. I had no idea. Obviously, we opened with the Gene timeline, which is post Breaking Bad, and obviously at this point, it goes without saying that not that there are no spoilers. There will be all the spoilers. So if you're watching any of these videos, just assume that you're going to be spoiled. I don't know. That's a really terrible way to word that. I'll leave that in for free. Just assume that I'm going to talk about everything, I guess is the best way to put it. So anyway, we open with that scene with Gene working in a Cinnabon, which I believe was alluded to at the end of Breaking Bad. So we have that. And then we go into 2002, which is when the show Better Call Saul is set, and where we follow the beginnings of Jimmy McGill. And I will say, going back to this first episode, the one thing that I thought, maybe that just doesn't quite fit with the greatness of the rest of the show, is the first case that Jimmy is, the first clients Jimmy is defending in public court, which are these 3 teenagers who cut off a corpse's head and had sexual intercourse with it. And I'm just like, the show's better than that. Like, the show is really better than that. But, and it wasn't that funny. It was just gross and weird. But the way we first see Jimmy in, like, silhouette, kind of practicing his kind of patter in the bathroom was fantastic. I'm going to give you an episode rundown, just for the sake of housekeeping. I'm going to try and move my way a little bit chronologically through the show, through the season, rather. But I'm not going to try and summarize everything. It's just going to be it's not going to be brief. It's me, and I'm talking about what I believe is the best show I've ever seen, and we'll get to that thought and that opinion maybe at the end of this video. So every season up until season 6 had 10 episodes. So season 1, we have episode 1, Uno. Episode 2 is Mijo. Episode 3 is Nacho. Episode 4 is Hero. Episode 5 is Alpine Shepherd Boy. Episode 6 is 5-0. Episode 7 is Bingo. And episode 8 is Rico. Episode 9, Pimento. And episode 10 is Marco. Now, I like the episode titling. I mean, in this one, it's like Uno, Mijo, Nacho, Hero, 5-0, Bingo, Rico, Pimento, Marco. And then Alpine Shepherd Boy is in the middle, kind of disrupting the rhythmic rhyming flow of all the episode titles. And there always seems to be a kind of theme, whether it's like every episode is one word or one word and something else. And then I think it was season 2, which we'll get to, I suppose. There was an anagram, Frings Back. But anyway, those are the episode titles for this season. And so we start out with that kind of the Gene timeline. We see Jimmy, and we're introduced to kind of the founding kind of elements of what this whole story is going to be, which is Jimmy McGill, his older brother Chuck McGill, who is this legendary lawyer at Hamlin McGill, which is a law firm that he built with, I forget the guy's name, but it was Howard Hamlin's father. Now it's just Howard Hamlin and Chuck McGill. And it's this prestigious law firm, but Chuck is no longer practicing. He's home with a condition. He has an issue where he is, as he puts it in layman's terms, allergic to electricity. So he kind of sits in his house with no electricity. He has a space blanket, as Jimmy calls it, this kind of mylar kind of foil substance, would you call it a substance? It's not a substance, it's a material that he wraps around himself when he's feeling to. I love all the little the tweaks. My words are getting all jumbled up today. All the little tweaks that Michael McKean puts into his performance of like the just, rubbing the neck like this and the shaking of the hand, and he doesn't overdo it. He reacts to this allergy to electricity in the way that a man would when he's really trying to suppress it, and you feel Chuck trying to suppress it, and he doesn't like that he can't control this. And it's a very wild thing, that, wow, is this real? A lot of people were thinking that when the show came out. And very quickly we see the dynamic between Jimmy and Chuck. Jimmy is always bringing Chuck like food and supplies and his favorite newspaper that he can only get in one stand in all of Albuquerque every day. Jimmy is a devoted kind of helper to his older brother, but you can tell that it's not this like jovial, loving kind of buddy relationship, and that Chuck is always looking at Jimmy with a certain sense of disdain. You kind of sense that as the first season rolls along. Maybe not from the first episode, but certainly as the season goes along. And Howard Hamlin, Chuck's partner in HHM, he is very much portrayed, as is said, as Darth Vader. He is the villain. He is the smarmy, prim and proper, kind of has everything. All this suit is perfectly tailored. And he's the guy who's holding Jimmy down. Because Jimmy, of course, wanted to work at HHM with his brother, but Howard Hamlin was having none of it. So Howard is pretty much positioned as the prick of this season. And in the very first episode, we get the Kettlemans, this couple who have embezzled like, I think $1.6 million from the government. And they're kind of like, I think it's Craig Kettleman and Betsy Kettleman. And Craig is just like, he's kind of helpless, and he's like embezzled all this money, but his wife seems to be like the brains of the operation. She's like, she's like, there is no money. Like she even has like the Karen haircut, not to use the Karen slur, but someone did joke for season 6, because the Kettlemans make a brief cameo, well, not cameo, but they make a brief return in one of the episodes of season 6, and someone said that Betsy Kettleman was the original Karen. So they've embezzled all this money, and Jimmy wants to try and retain them and be their kind of lawyer, but they move away from that, and I think they go to HHM. So we get introduced to the kind of Kettleman case, which becomes a big story in season 1. And then Jimmy enlists the help of these young skaters who try to prank him early on in the episode, and he catches them because this is Jimmy. He knows a con when he sees one, and he's a great con man himself. And so he spots that the skaters are trying to hustle him, and then later on decides to hire them to hustle the Kettlemans so that he can swoop in dramatically and win them back so that he can be their counsel. Only they get run over by this old woman instead. So when Jimmy chases down this old woman and the skaters, he ends up at a house, and at the house is a man called Tuco Salamanca. And I do think, looking back, and even then at the time, it felt a little bit like hey kids, it's a Breaking Bad character. I mean, obviously, Jimmy is a Breaking Bad character. Mike Ehrmantraut, who we see I believe he's in the first episode, we see him at the courthouse toll booth, and him and Jimmy have a very antagonistic relationship with each other in the beginning, where Jimmy doesn't bring the right amount of stickers, and Mike is like, those are the rules. You need 6 stickers, 6 stickers or $5. Like, so Jimmy's just like this fucking guy under the bridge. So yeah, I mean, we've seen Breaking Bad characters already, but like Tuco just felt a bit like a kind of wheeling out. Do you know what I mean? It was a little bit like that, but in the way that it ended with him opening the door, and it kind of assumes that you have to have seen Breaking Bad, because otherwise the reveal doesn't mean anything if you start from the beginning, if you're not being chronologically. But at the same time, you get the Gene stuff. So I do feel like, in a way, the Breaking Bad universe is best viewed chronologically from air date. So Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, because you have the flash forwards of Gene, and those don't quite make sense if you haven't seen Breaking Bad. That being said, I am currently planning on going through all of Better Call Saul until the final episodes air. And once I've seen all of Better Call Saul, I'm going to go back and do Breaking Bad and run through the whole timeline. So that might be something where I might make a few more videos. I don't know. I'm not promising anything. Anyway, so where are we now? We're in episode 1. So episode 2, with Miho, we have Tuco taking out Jimmy and the two Skater twins into the desert. Now, something I noticed this time around is that they very clearly were trying to match continuity with the sky, because they're out in the desert, and there were times where the sky just seemed too blue and the clouds weren't moving really as naturally. And I could tell that they'd cut out like the background. And even the final shot of that sequence, which is Tuco breaking the legs of the two skater kids, it's a very long shot. Zooms in on Jimmy, and I think it zooms out again, but it's a long shot, and you can tell they've rotoscoped, like Tuco and Jimmy, just to make the sky match, which is an impressive amount of attention to detail. But I think for me it just jumped out more. But that is coming from someone who very much like notices things like matte lines and rotoscoping and effects and things like that. So that's just me. I don't know. And it wasn't like a detractor. It was just something like, oh, they really put a lot of effort in to make the sky match, which I've never felt that before in this show or Breaking Bad, in terms of noticing like a fairly aggressive, like trying to make the sky match by kind of, replacing it sort of thing. It really stood out to me. But that whole sequence, you get to see Jimmy's superpower, which is his voice, his words, his brain, his tongue, and how he's able to work himself out of a situation. And we're introduced to Nacho, played by Michael Mando, who is there to kind of like help Tuco calm down a bit too, because as we all know from Breaking Bad, Tuco is a very volatile person. So Jimmy and Nacho kind of both work together in a way to bring Tuco down. And then Nacho, because Jimmy tells the whole story of why he had the skaters try to calm the Kettlemans, Nacho wants in on this Kettleman money, so he wants Jimmy to help him steal the money. And Jimmy's like, hey, I'm not a criminal, and so that's, and he's, oh, you just represent criminals, and so Nacho is kind of like, he's saying to Jimmy, you're kind of in the game. I love how we're introduced to Jimmy's like office at the back of a nail salon, this tiny little rinky-dink office. It's kind of cozy to me, I don't know. And no cucumber water for customer only. Like I remember when this came out, I wanted to make cucumber water because it just sounded so refreshing and nice. And the fact that Jimmy has like always denied it made me want to try it even more. And I remember I did it once. I cut up some cucumber, put it in water, and it was alright. Wasn't as refreshing as I imagined it would be. Anyway. Yeah, so then I think that around this point in the story, the kind of Kelman thing is going on, and that's kind of the driving force of what Jimmy is up to. Kim Wexler, played by Ray Seahorn. I believe she's in the first episode, and she's, to me, it's almost iconic now, is that sequence in the basement parking lot of HHM, where she's kind of like up against the wall with a cigarette, and Jimmy comes in, he bums a smoke from her, I think, and they're just there kind of, hanging out, and you immediately get this sense of like comfortability between them, and there's a chemistry between them. And it's a little bit like the Aaron Paul thing with Breaking Bad. He was supposed to play Jesse Pinkman in the first season of Breaking Bad, and I believe his character was supposed to die either in the first or second season, but Aaron Paul was incredible, and he stayed and became, the second lead of the show, basically. Kim Wexler didn't even have a surname when they were writing the show. And Ray Seahorn's chemistry with Bob Odenkirk was undeniable, and now she is like the second lead of the show. There's no denying that Kim is one of the most massive parts of the story at this point. And even, I would say, perhaps the most intriguing part of the whole show, because the biggest question we have leading into these final 6 episodes of the show is what happens to Kim. Where does Kim end up in all of this? Where was Kim during Breaking Bad? Is she dead? Is that what completely just cuts off, Jimmy's soul? Or is she working behind the scenes? Is she Mrs. Saul Goodman? Or has she gone away? There's so many, well, not so many, there's really only 3. There's only 3 things. Either she's there working with Jimmy off screen in Breaking Bad, or she died, or she went away. There's only 3 ways to go about it, but it's that's the big mystery for me, is what happens to Kim. So there's that. But in this first season, she's definitely not as big of a presence as she'll be in further seasons, but she's definitely felt. Episode 3, Natro, we have a flashback, and I love the flashbacks in the show. There's so many. It's a rich tapestry that they're building, and they're continuing to add to it with all these different flashbacks of many different characters. And it makes me want to make like a chronological Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul cut, where it's just like starting from like, I mean, when would be the earliest? Probably like the 50s, when you see Mike kind of with his son, I suppose, with Matty from season 4. And you could just go chronologically, but we see Chuck helping Jimmy after the Chicago sunroof incident, and I like how they shoot the flashbacks in like a different color tone, and it kind of hides some of the limitations of the makeup because they're trying to make these characters look a little bit younger in some cases, very much younger. In other cases, it depends on the timeline, I suppose. But we see that Chuck kind of, Jimmy has to really persuade his older brother to help him out of this because he's the only one who can. And that's kind of the genesis of Jimmy going from Chicago over to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and kind of living in close proximity to Chuck, who maybe is going to kind of keep an eye on him. But that whole relationship is so fascinating to me. And so any Jimmy and Chuck scenes for me are just fantastic. Jimmy then warns the Kettlemans, gives them this kind of bullshit kind of phone call where he's kind of like, someone's coming after you, and the Kettlemans are kind of a bit oblivious, and so they make a run for it. And so now it's a big thing. The Kettlemans have disappeared. Nacho was also kind of like casing out the joint, so someone noticed that Nacho or one of Nacho's men was in a van outside, so now Nacho is being questioned by the police, and Jimmy's trying to sort out all of this. Kim is there with HHM, and Jimmy's like, there's a better solution to this. There's some other way. And he realizes that the Kettleman... Actually, no, he doesn't. Mike is the one who gives Jimmy the intel. He's like, well, in most cases, when someone runs away like that, they don't run away too far. There was a case that he had where there was someone who was hiding from the law, and they were hiding on the same street in a disused house for months. And so Jimmy goes on a big hike, and he finds the Kettlemans, happy campers, quite literally, singing along with their kids in a tent. And he's like, right, come on, we're going, and pulls the bag, and all the money flies out. The money that Mrs. Kettleman just was, would swear on a children's grave. Like, I swear on the graves of my parents and on my children's lives that there is no money, we've embezzled no money. And then Jimmy finds the money. And that's kind of the dramatic end of that episode. And then episode 4, there's like, because Jimmy, he wants to bring this Kettleman case over. Like, he wants to be the one to kind of, for him it's a big deal, because you can see in the beginning of the first episode, he's working these horrible cases where it's like, again, or maybe that's the whole point, is that he's literally working in these horrible dog shit cases of like teenagers, like desecrating corpses, whereas this Kettleman thing is like, it's like a big deal. But in episode 4, he does this weird thing because he gets kind of paid off by the Kettlemans to not say anything. And he uses that dirty money to pay for a super expensive suit, gets himself a makeover to look like Howard Hamlin, and then makes up a billboard copying the HHM logo. And it's kind of like a fuck you to Howard, I guess. And Howard is like not happy about it, and they get into a stupid thing where like Howard is like trademarked the color Hamlindigo. And so there's some really like stupid stuff about that. Like, I really enjoyed the kind of like the font is too similar to the HHM font, and so Jimmy's got to take down the billboard. But then he gets this bright idea that he's going to stage this rescuing, where he's filming an interview. I forget what he was actually filming. Jimmy is filming something, and behind him a worker falls off the billboard, and he's like dangling by a thread. So Jimmy goes up as the big hero and saves the guy, and that kind of makes news. And that I think starts bringing Jimmy in like some business, which makes Chuck suspicious. He's like, oh really? So just out of the blue, you're getting all these calls and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I guess it's just And Jimmy being Jimmy doesn't really give anything away. But then Chuck wants to find out, and oh yeah, that's right, because Jimmy's like, he doesn't bring Chuck the newspaper he wants, and so Chuck then, because he can't go outside because there's so much electricity, he goes outside just to steal his neighbor's newspaper, which then leads the police to come over to his house because he's stolen this newspaper. Even though he leaves money, he's like, I left money behind, and they burst through the door, and Chuck has a massive episode. But I've completely forgotten about like Jimmy dressing up as Howard. That was a really weird one. I think that was a bit odd, but it is what it is. And the billboard stuff is just funny. And I think this is where we're introduced to the student film crew, who kind of like semi kind of like major supporting characters in each. So they always pop up in some way, shape, or form, and you grow to really like those. I really like those characters, especially the guy in the glasses. You call him the director. Well, I guess Jimmy's the director, but the camera guy, and he's just so aloof and uninterested and stuff. And then the makeup girl is like, you can tell she really likes Jimmy and stuff, and she wants to help him out. And the sound guy's just there for the money and the laughs, because there's always something really strange and weird for Jimmy to get them to do. But yeah, Chuck, he finds out that Jimmy pulled this stunt with the billboard, and obviously he's not happy about it, but he gets rushed to hospital. And we get the nurses who don't really understand his condition, and Jimmy, and this is where you really see that, Jimmy and Chuck do not see eye to eye, but Jimmy really loves his brother. And he's like, come on, everyone, like, hand up your devices. Like, he really wants to help Chuck. And it's really sweet and makes the whole relationship even more heartbreaking, because Jimmy is there so much for Chuck. And at one point in one of the seasons, Chuck says, like, I hope you know that I would do the same for you. I think he says that. Maybe he doesn't. But I feel like he says that and you just don't buy it. You think, I don't think he would. I don't think Chuck would help Jimmy or be there for Jimmy in the same way Jimmy is for Chuck. And obviously the nurse is like suspicious of this electricity allergy, and Chuck is like, very lucid and like, look, hey, I know it sounds ridiculous, but like this is the real deal. He hasn't been diagnosed with this, which is the big thing. And then Howard turns up, and Jimmy's, Jimmy really has it in for Howard, and you learn to see why throughout the entirety of the show. But yeah, so the 5th episode, Alpine Shepherd Boy, that's where I think, because Jimmy gets a kind of actually there's one really funny part where Jimmy gets a call, and it's this guy who's like, I'm going to pay you $1 million. I forget, it was like, I'm going to give you $1 million on retainer. And Jimmy's just like, this is it. This is like, I'm going places now. This is holy shit, it's worked. And the guy brings out this briefcase. He's like, I want to like start my own sovereign state, and he's got this briefcase full of like dollar bills. And he's like, hey, here's your first payment. And it's this payment of his own currency that he's got printed up with his face on it. And Jimmy's just like, So that was a really funny bit that I completely forgot about since the first time I watched the show. But he meets a woman who wants her will done, and this woman, she comes kind of like she gets referenced a few times throughout the series, but she has the Alpine Shepherd Boy, the little figurine and stuff, and she stars in a commercial for Jimmy in a few episodes later, I think, something like that. I forget exactly when, but it's anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So this woman wants her will done, and Jimmy has a good rapport with elderly people, and Kim suggests maybe elder law or something you should look into. So that's kind of the route that Jimmy decides to kind of start taking. And then we have in episode 6, kind of a complete departure. We've seen little bits of Mike, and the one thing that I found really interesting going back, I mean, there's a lot of layers that going from episode 7 of season 6 back to episode 1 of season 1, there's so much more context for every character. For Jimmy, for Chuck, even, for Nacho, for Mike, for Kim, for Howard, and everything has more weight to it because now I know so much more of what their fuller stories are. But with Mike, the police turn up and they're kind of speaking to Mike, and Mike is like, he looks mad just to be kind of talked to by the police. And you kind of know why, because of this episode 5-0. So Mike used to be a police officer in Philadelphia. And 5-0 is the origin story of how Mike ends up in Albuquerque. We don't know exactly why his daughter-in-law Stacy goes there, but we see him arrive on a train. He's been shot, and there's that wonderful, like, the Mike sequences are just so great, where he like, hello, anyone in there? He goes into the women's toilets, gets out a tampon thing, or goes into the toilets and kind of uses the tampon thing to heal himself, or not heal himself, but like to cover over the wound, to like, to stop himself from bleeding, and then he straps it on and he acts like there's nothing wrong with his daughter-in-law. Just little tiny invention. It's kind of like the hint of what's to come, just a very small thing. And I often wonder, like, what would Mike do if some of these things just didn't play out exactly the way that he wanted them to? What if he went, anyone in there? And it's like, yeah, there's 3 women in here, dude. You're not getting in there anytime soon. So no tampons. How does he heal his, or not heal? How does he stop the bullet wound from bleeding? Anyway, but it's satisfying to see him find these different methods and they work, and it's Mike. Mike's the fixer, and at this point in time he's fixing himself. But we learn, and we get like little kind of hints of his daughter-in-law Stacy being unsatisfied with things left unsaid about her husband Matty, who had died recently, and he was a police officer, and he was on the job, and he was shot in a drug bust. And Mike is very reluctant to talk about it. He gets very angry about her talking about money that she found in Matty's, in the house that he'd hidden. And Mike is like, my son was not dirty. He was not a dirty cop. Like, he gets really fucking angry about it. And then we see the story play out, where Mike is rigging up one of these police cruisers, and then he goes into a bar and he gets drunk, and he looks over and sees his son's 2 partners, and he goes over and he grabs him in a double headlock, and he's like, I knew it was you. I knew it was you. And it's like the Godfather Part 2 moment. And so he gets loaded, or does he? And I don't know whether like he actually got loaded or whether he pretended to, but either way, he knew what he was doing. And they're like, hey, Mike, can we give you a ride home? And they stick him in the back. And there's so much loaded tension in the back of that police car. And he's just like, I knew it was you. And he's like, I knew that, you're all crooked, and you wanted my son to come in on all of that and stuff. And he refused because he did the right thing, and you had to get rid of him. And it never had to go that way. And so they drive him to this like industrial, it's like the Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, like signature location, just a random industrial estate somewhere abandoned. And they're going to kill Mike, And what Mike did was he hid a gun in their car before he went into the bar. So when they pull him out from the back and he's drunk, and they take his gun that's in his pocket. And so they feel like, okay, we're safe now, he's unarmed. And then he grabs the second gun. And there was something about this sequence where he just shoots these 2 guys, and they get a lucky shot in on him, but he fucking mows these guys down with his gun. It was really emotional to me. I don't know what it was. It's just, it really hit hard, because this is a guy whose son was killed by these 2 fucking dirty pricks. And he did what he had to do, and he fucking killed them. Now, I never think violence is the answer to anything. I think that cycle is pointless and painful and doesn't really solve anything. But there is still this raw kind of fucking catharsis of that when you see these 2 guys, these fucking miserable bastards, eye for an eye, and it's just, it really moved me more this time than anything. And then Mike goes into his daughter-in-law's and kind of tells her the story. I broke my boy, and it's, and talks about how he was a dirty cop because everyone did it. And he would take bribes and all of this stuff, and everyone did it. And his son didn't want to, and he told his son, you have to do it. And so he made Matty take this money, but Matty just, he didn't take it convincingly, and they could sense that and I said earlier that he refused the money, but he didn't. But he wasn't able to convince his partners that he was on the level, and that's why they killed him. And that's where Mike feels this guilt. He's like, I broke my boy. Like, it's my fault he's dead. And then Stacy's like, well, they were both shot recently. Was it you? Well, she didn't say, was it you? She kind of leads into it, and he's just like, all I'm saying is I did what I had to do. It's a fucking incredible episode. I have no idea why he didn't win an Emmy for it. I have no idea why he hasn't won an Emmy for the role of Mike Ehrmantraut in general. It's a phenomenal episode, one of my favorite episodes of television. Jonathan Banks is incredible. And it's the Mike origin story, and it did not disappoint at all. And I believe the story is, while making Breaking Bad, Jonathan Banks was saying to Vince Gilligan, like, the key to Mike is his son, because he could see the whole thing with the daughter-in-law and the granddaughter. But he's like, the key to Mike's backstory is the son. And it turns out very much that Matty Ermentrout was the key to Mike's story, and to a lot of his internalized, regret and pain, I guess. Episode 7, Bingo. This is where Jimmy kind of he kind of lures Chuck back into the game. I'm just gonna leave all these papers here in your house. Just don't mind them, just for a few days. And Chuck's like, goes over and starts like sorting through them. And Jimmy's like, oh great. And Chuck's like, don't think I don't know what you were doing there. This is a one-time thing. I've done the work for you, but you're on your own from now on. And then Kim declines Jimmy's kind of proposal of the two of them joining forces and being Wexler and McGill. And he's even kind of like scouted out an office and stuff. And he's like, this is the corner office. This is where you'll go. And you can tell that she really likes Jimmy. But she has a career in HHM. They put her through law school. She owes a debt to them. She's been with them for a decade. She can't really go off with Jimmy at this point professionally, and she doesn't feel like they, would make a good fit. And so that kind of devastates Jimmy, which is, you really feel that, I think, and it's something that is a big part of the whole story, I think, is Jimmy really wanting to just work with Kim, and this ideal vision of them together, both, personally but professionally, is something that I think he's always trying to work towards. And when they do get there later on in the show and the story, there's always complications, and it never quite works out the way that he probably hopes that it would. And then he and Mike kind of conspire to steal the Kettleman's $1.6 million, because he wants to kind of wrap that up, and kind of get that thing done, because they're just refusing to own up to anything that they're doing. And they don't want, because they're trying to cut deals here and there, and they're not getting anywhere with it. They go back to Jimmy, and they say to Jimmy, well, you took some of our money, don't forget, and so Jimmy's like backed into a corner. So he gets Mike to steal their money. It's another brilliant Mike sequence where he kind of like, he gets the fingerprints. So it wasn't the fingerprints, but like there's like he leaves some money out on like a remote control car, so that Craig Kettleman will take the money back to where it's hidden. And then Mike goes in with like the blue lights and kind of finds the trail, finds where the money's hidden, and steals it. And I love Betsy's reaction the next day when Jimmy's like, we got the money, underneath the sink, ring any bells? And she freaks out, and she's like, you've taken the money. And so like the Kettleman thing wraps up really nicely around that point in the show. And then episode 8, Rico, opens with this great flashback where Jimmy reveals to Kim that he has passed the bar and he is now a lawyer. He was it the Law Association of American Samoa or something like that. And he goes to Chuck's office, and he's like, and it's weird to see Chuck in an office, like not with the condition or anything. And Chuck is like, wow, you passed the bar. You must have been studying this in private for years. And Jimmy's like, I know. And this is heartbreaking when Jimmy's like, are you proud of me? And Chuck is like, oh, yeah. And you, oh, God, you can tell he doesn't mean it. And it's just, and then Jimmy's like, well, I was hoping I could get an office next to yours. You can hide me in HHM. And Chuck's like, oh, I'd have to speak to the partners, And Jimmy's like, okay, yeah, of course. And it's the whole relationship between Jimmy and Chuck is a storied saga of pain. And it's amazing to watch, and it's heartbreaking to watch at the same time. So I love that flashback and that insight into their relationship, and there's a lot of them throughout the first 3 seasons. And then later on in this episode, Jimmy discovers another huge part of this whole kind of story, which is the Sandpiper saga. This company that controls a lot of retirement homes, and they've been very slowly but surely embezzling money out of these old people, like kind of giving them bills, and it'll be something random that it isn't really there, and just a bit here and a bit there, and they've stolen a lot of money off these old people. And Jimmy figures that, he cracks the code. And it's really exciting when he goes back in, he can see them shredding papers already. They know that he's onto him, and he writes down the kind of letter of, I'm giving you this formal letter of like, I'm filing an action against you or whatever it is. I don't know these legal terms, but he writes it on a piece of toilet paper. And then we're introduced to Schweikart and Coakley and Richard Schweikart, and he's kind of like, they're defending, or they're the lawyers for Sandpiper, I suppose. And then Chuck, he fishes out all of the kind of shredded papers, and he's trying to like piece them together. And it's just maddening seeing him try to even attempt this. And Chuck comes in, and while Jimmy's passed out, Chuck kind of puts together a lot of this stuff, and Chuck's like, "We got him. This is big. This is going to be a huge case. We've got to, and then we've got to bring it to HHM." And Jimmy's like, "No, we'll just do it together." He's like, "No, we need to bring it into the firm." And so the Sandpiper thing becomes huge. Like Schweikart and Coakley come over to Jimmy and Chuck's, or to Chuck's house with Jimmy there, and Chuck just kind of sits there saying nothing, and Jimmy's kind of like firing away, and Chuck's like, we want $20 million or something stupid like that. They're just like, okay, we're taking this to court, and Chuck's like, this is huge, this is massive. So this is a great win for Jimmy. He's discovered this incredible case with all this potential thing. They go to HHM, and Howard is like, Jimmy, you did great work in finding this and everything, and we're going to give you like a substantial finder's fee for this. You're looking at a massive payout when this whole thing comes through. And Jimmy's like, great. He's like, I want the office wherever it is over there. I've got it all picked out. And Howard's like, can I have the room for a minute? And Howard's like, we don't need your services at this time. And Jimmy's like, well, I thought that I was going to work here, and I found the thing. He's like, well, no. And Chuck is like, wow, I can't believe this, Howard. And this is like the big thing of season 1, which it's devastating, because you really, I mean, I don't know how early on you can tell, but it becomes clear that this whole kind of this story of Jimmy being held back from being in HHM and kind of working with his brother because of Howard Hamlin, it's actually because of his brother Chuck, who has told Howard in no uncertain terms, you would assume that there's no way my brother is working with us, and you have to take the fall on that, and you have to deny him at every turn. And Howard, feeling a sense of duty to Chuck, goes along with it and kind of becomes the fall guy in a sense for that. And so, and around this time as well with the Sandpiper case, Chuck is like going outside into Jimmy's car to get more files, and Jimmy's like, you okay? And Chuck's like, oh, I'm outside. He's so distracted that he forgot about it. And the brilliant opening of episode 9, I think, where it's Jimmy and Chuck just sat on a park bench outside his house, and he's like feeling the blades of grass in between his toes and looking up kind of a little bit nervously at the power box on the lamppost across the road. And they just sat there together, and it gives you a hint of the fact that maybe, well, more than maybe, Chuck's condition is maybe not physical, but it might be a mental thing, which is another kind of, I wouldn't say it's a mystery of the show, but it's certainly a big focal point of Chuck's character. And then also Mike's kind of story begins to kind of shift as he's taking on jobs to kind of support his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter Kaylee. So Mike gets a call to be basically a heavy bodyguard, a backup for this guy Daniel. Is it Daniel Price, who is this guy who to me just looks like he stepped out of GTA 5 Lester. Doesn't act like him, but he's this total dweeb who's selling pharmaceutical drugs to Nacho. And it's a brilliant scene in this parking garage where we have Mike with his pimento sandwich in the bag on the floor. You have the guy who played Trevor in GTA 5, like showing off all his guns and stuff. And then you have a huge big guy who's like, proper, like, you wouldn't mess with this guy. And Mike's like, well, you don't need either of these two guys. I'm all you need. And Daniel's like, wow, I need 3 guys. Mike's like, no, I suggest you just pay me all the money and I'll do the job. And, he hasn't got a gun with him. And he just quickly dispatches with the first guy. The other guy leaves. And Daniel's like really nervous about it. And then Mike, at the end of the whole transaction with Nacho, Mike is like, I vetted the guy. I knew there was no need for a gun because Nacho works under the Salamancas and there's no way he wants them to know about this side hustle he's got going on selling these drugs. So again, Mike, he's the man with a plan. He's got it all figured out. But yeah, the whole Chuck stuff, it's like the big like showstopper scene near the end of episode 9 is when Jimmy, crestfallen at the whole being denied at working with HHM on the Sandpiper case, he comes back to Chuck's house and he's like, I just can't believe it. I can't believe that after all this, that this would happen to me. And he's like, unless it was you. And he's like, I knew it was you. We get the second I knew it was you moment where he's just like, you're the one who denied me every step of the way and everything. And the way that Michael McKean plays this is fucking masterful. Where at first he's like, oh, I can't believe it, Jimmy. And then his face it just hardens. And then Chuck just unleashes these just truth bombs, dropping them. Boom, boom, boom. And he's like, you're slipping Jimmy, which they established in the first episode of the show, the whole slipping Jimmy backstory where Jimmy is talking to the skaters and saying like, I knew a guy called Slippin' Jimmy who, would, and so there's this whole kind of background where he used to be such a con man. And Chuck is like, Slippin' Jimmy, you'll never change. People don't change. That's the way you are. You're always going to be a con man. And he's like, Slippin' Jimmy I can handle just fine. But Slippin' Jimmy with a law degree is like a chimp with a machine gun. Oh, brilliant line and delivered with such venom by Michael McKean. And it's just a fucking incredible moment in the show. And then episode 10, Marco, Jimmy's just like, he's very disenchanted with everything. And he goes back home to Philadelphia and meets up with his old friend Marco, who we saw in a flashback, I think, a few episodes previously. And I think it was when he was leaving Philadelphia to go to Albuquerque. I believe that's when it was anyway. I can't remember if there... No, it wasn't that. That's in season 2, I think. Or maybe not. I'm not entirely sure. But I think we were first introduced to Marco which is the first time we're introduced to the name Saul Goodman. We see a scam that they're running where Jimmy goes out drinking with a guy, goes into an alleyway, and then, there's a wallet here with all this money. And then they see a man behind a dumpster. And the guy's like, oh, God, there's $1,000 in here. And then Jimmy's like, oh, look at that Rolex. I'll take that. You keep the money. And they're like, well, no, how much is that? Well, no, And then he ends up getting the person to pay him more for this cheap fake Rolex that he kind of conned them out of. And then the guy lying down on the floor is his friend Marco. And that's the scam. And he says, what's your name again? It's like, Saul Goodman, Saul Goodman. And I'm you won't believe this. Maybe you will. But hey, it's me. I didn't figure out the whole Saul Goodman. I didn't figure that out for years. Not into this show. But like Breaking Bad. I think I watched the entirety of Breaking Bad, never getting the it's all good, man. It's Saul Goodman. Anyway, we get the first introduction of him using the alias Saul Goodman back in Philadelphia. But in episode 10, he goes back to Marco and they run scams together all week. It's really fun seeing them at work and like the coin and everything. It's some brilliant stuff. And then Marco dies, which is really, they run the scam again with the dumpster thing, but he doesn't wake up. And it's a really mournful episode, that one, where you feel like his relationship with his brother is never going to be the same again. He did all this work. He solved the Ketman case. He's ingeniously kind of figured that out, not lawfully, but which is kind of his thing. And then you find out the whole, like, the reveal of what Chuck had done in kind of holding his brother back. And I love when in that flashback sequence where we see Jimmy go to Chuck and say, I'm a lawyer now. And everyone's celebrating in like the mailroom and stuff. And then Howard comes in to let Jimmy know that we're not going to take you up on HHM at this time. And he goes into the room, and it's like glass windows. and we don't hear the dialogue, but we can tell exactly what's going on by the way that their body language is, which is another way that this show is so great, both in terms of that artistic choice directorially, but also the performances of Bob Odenkirk and Patrick Fabian in that scene. You sense everything that's going on without the dialogue. But so yeah, we get the the kind of the last hurrah with Marco, and they kind of they hook up with these two women, and this woman in the morning, she looks at Jimmy and she's like, "You're not Kevin Costner." He's like, "Hey, and you're like Kevin Costner's manager." And so that's kind of like the last kind of moments of the show, really. And at the funeral, he gets a call from Kim, who's managed to get Jimmy this opening at another law firm in Santa Fe called Davis and Main. And Jimmy's like, "Wow, I can't believe you swung that for me, Kim. Thank you so much." And she's like, "Well, they see that you've done a lot of good work with elder law and the discovery of the Sandpiper case, so they want to give you a shot." And it's like, I think it's like a partner track or something, so like it's a promising job. And so he goes back to the court to meet with Davis and Main, and then he turns back and he gets in his beat up car, and on his way out, there's Mike there in the toll booth, and he's like, "Was it just me, Mike, or were we just like sat there in my office a few weeks ago with $1.6 million in our hands, tax free? Like, we could have just walked away with that money. Why didn't we do it?" And Mike's like, "Well, you said something about doing the right thing. For me, I was hired to do a job. I did it. That's as far as it goes." And Jimmy's like, "Well, I'm never going to make that same mistake again." And he drives off and he starts humming along to Deep Purple, Smoke on the Water. And then the song starts and the car rolls down the road. The camera pans down to the lines in the middle of the street. Bam, the end. Season 1 in the can. Fucking brilliant. That's Jimmy going like, "Okay, I'm going to do things my own way now." But that being said, I do feel like there's not a huge change, because in the beginning of season 2, he starts doing things that are not really what he wants to do. But it's still a really cool moment, which at first I was really disappointed in. When I first saw that in 2015, I was like, "Oh, that was the end of the season?" And I was kind of expecting him to go like, "I am Saul Goodman," like the Iron Man ending, and it's really not that at all. I think it's like the end of season 4 when he's like, I'm Saul Goodman now." But people have said this is the moment where he becomes Saul Goodman, or it's like the genesis, and it certainly is where he decides to make a change, and that leads into season 2 and how he kind of steps away from law. So I mean, he does, at least for a little bit, do things his own way, but he ends up being listless. We'll get to that in season 2, but he becomes kind of a listless presence at that point. But yeah, so that's season 1. Standouts to me. Oh, you also get to see the Howard like scene where I think it is Jimmy and Howard who have the talk, and Howard's like, I forget exactly what he says, but he alludes to the fact that Chuck was the one who's kind of holding Jimmy back, and you get to see that Howard isn't this like colossal prick, and that maybe those moments where Howard seems like he's being like, like sly, like, oh, like he cares for Chuck. And obviously we're viewing Howard through Jimmy's lens for the most of the first season. So we see everything that Howard does is disingenuous. But we learn at the end, maybe it wasn't. Maybe Howard just is a nice guy. He's a bit smarmy, he's a bit pompous, a bit cutthroat, but he isn't a bad person. And I really like that last beat where he says to Jimmy, like, "I always liked you, Jimmy." He's like, "Remember what I used to call you? Charlie Hustle," And that's like it's like a really fun like nickname for Jimmy, where it's like Slippin' Jimmy is like the kind of rough and ready kind of like nickname that kind of sums up what he's about. Charlie Hustle is like the kind of like Peanuts version. It's like it's a sweet kind of like comic book version for kids. Like the kind of the wholesome version of Jimmy McGill is like Charlie Hustle. I like that. But yeah, so watching it now, knowing and having seen the rest of the show up until season 6, it's a fucking killer ending. I love it. So it's just improving for me on a rewatch. And I don't remember season 1 being all that spectacular. For me, in my mind's eye, it starts kind of slow and it's really good, but it takes a while for things to get rolling with like the Salamancas and then Gus coming into the show and all that kind of stuff. But man, it's a phenomenal opening season. Going back and looking at it and remembering things. Oh yeah, that scene. And Michael McKean is just phenomenal. Chuck is such a great fucking character, but Chuck is nothing without Jimmy, and it's a two-way street. And Bob Odenkirk kind of transforms himself because Saul Goodman is Saul Goodman. Jimmy McGill is a fascinating character, and there are more to come. And I think that Kim Wexler is one of the more compelling characters, and she isn't as such in the first season, but there are these faint glimmers of it. Whereas right from the beginning, Jimmy and Chuck is like the main event, and Mike is just Mike. Mike is just, it's great to see more of his backstory, and I love because he was such a great character in Breaking Bad. Who again, going back to the Kim thing, where she wasn't meant to be a huge character, going back to Jesse not meaning to be a huge character. It was season 2 of Breaking Bad where Mike shows up as the fixer. That was supposed to be Saul cleaning up the apartment, but Bob Odenkirk was unavailable, and so okay, we'll come up with a character called the Cleaner. Mike, and Jonathan Banks auditions, becomes Mike, and now he's just like one of the best characters of Breaking Bad. But he died at the end of season 5, spoilers. And it's like, oh man, no more Mike. But then we got like 6 more seasons of Mike like being like the co-lead character of the whole show. I'm so grateful that happened, because Mike Ehrmantraut in Breaking Bad is, for me, an all-time great television character. Now with 6 seasons of Better Call Saul, even a cameo appearance in El Camino, the movie, for me, maybe my favorite character in TV ever. I mean, maybe rivaled by perhaps Special Agent Dale Cooper. It's tricky, but Mike is just the man. And it was so great to see this first season and not knowing how far the show was going to go. But yeah, I loved it then, and I love it much more now because I know so much more about what happens to the characters, and that adds an added weight and context to everything. And for me, it's just a phenomenal season of television, and I definitely wanted to make these season reviews like 10 to 15 minutes long. I've been talking for over an hour, so I'm sat down here with my camera and my lights and my microphone, ready to do like 3 or 4 videos, and this is it for me for tonight because I really went on, but I enjoyed it. I love the show. And I guess I'll end on this. Like, as this show was rounding down, the end of season 1 was ending in 2015, people were starting to say this is better than Breaking Bad. Like, people were saying that there's something more clever going on at play here. There's a lot more subtlety going on at play here. There are performances that are great without being as so outlandish, and I completely agree with that. I won't get into a whole big thing about it. Maybe I will towards the end. And I'm intrigued to go back to Breaking Bad. I haven't really watched Breaking Bad from start to finish since 2013 when I watched it twice. So it's almost 10 years. In my mind's eye, Breaking Bad was the best show I'd ever seen. It was explosive, and it was emotional, and it was funny, and it was brilliantly made in every way imaginable. But I just feel like this filmmaking team, they made Breaking Bad like one of the best shows ever. And then they took a couple of years break, or a year break, and then started working Better Call Saul, and they've just continued, and they've just improved and gotten better and better and better. And like the explosive moments in Better Call Saul often come through subtler means, and I think the characters are more complex. There's more layered emotions going on. It isn't the simple through line of, as Vince Gilligan likes to say with Walter White, Mr. Chips turns into Scarface. It's not as easy as that. Nothing is simple in Better Call Saul, and their journeys are full of, nothing is simple in Breaking Bad in a sense too. There are many layers and subtle emotions and things like that in Breaking Bad too. I just feel like Better Call Saul it's a more cerebral experience, and I find it more impressive that I get just as wrapped up in it as I do Breaking Bad, without like disintegrating bodies falling through the ceiling, without all these dramatic killings and things, which still happen in Better Call Saul, but they're few and far between. And all the legal stuff is like the way that it's presented in a way that shows the boring side of it, but makes the boring unboring, I think there's so many magic tricks going on. And the writing, the direction, the cinematography, the performances and the story are all just, as David Brent would motion, proper, connected in such a beautiful way. And so I think it's a better show than Breaking Bad, and by proxy, now, 6.5 seasons in, or 5.5 seasons in, I guess you should say, I think it's the best show I've ever seen. And I guess I'll just say this now as well. Now that I'm about to start season 5, I've been loving this. I'll talk a little bit more about it as we move through these episodes, but of this series of me talking about the show and the different seasons. But it's been such a thrill. I've been like on the edge of my seat, like next episode, and I've seen all these before, but I get so wrapped up in it. And I'll talk more about it next time because season 2 was really a revelation for me. And I was speaking to my friend Robbie Webster. Again, it goes back to the first time I really heard about Breaking Bad properly from like the story of it. And me and Robbie talk, sporadically these days, which is a shame, but it is what it is, and we're both busy. But we both love this show. And as I was revisiting the first season, he's like, "Oh, season 2 is like my favorite." I was like, "Really, season 2?" I was like, "What happened in season 2?" And I remembered vague things. I thought, "Well, there's that thing at the end," but like, really, season 2? Season 2, holy fuck. Let's get into it next time on Breaking Down Better Call Saul. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.